All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving deep into MyAssays Desktop software.
Excited.
We've got the user guide right here in front of us. It's going to be our map as we explore.
Awesome.
We're going beyond, the marketing stuff and really trying to see how this thing works.
The nuts and bolts.
Yeah, and that's the key, right? I mean, anybody can say their software is easy to use or it's flexible, but we want to see how it actually works in the real world, for you, the listener.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's just start with the basics. What is MyAssays Desktop?
Okay, so basically, MyAssays Desktop, it kind of bridges that gap between the raw data you get off your instruments and the results that you can actually use.
Okay.
It's kind of a translator. You feed it, those raw measurements from your plate reader or your spectrophotometer or whatever you're using.
Right.
And it turns them into things like concentrations and, standard curves, things you can use to draw conclusions.
So instead of having this jumbled mess of numbers, you can actually see what your experiment is telling you.
Exactly. And the cool thing is it doesn't just spit out those numbers and then leave you hanging. It walks you through the whole analysis process.
Really?
Yeah. Like say you need to find a protocol for your specific assay. It's got you covered. Or you want to tweak some parameters or generate some reports or even keep track of different versions of your results.
Oh, nice.
MyAssays Desktop, it can handle it.
Wow. So it really adapts to what you need. You're not trying to adapt to the software.
That's the idea, yeah.
That's great. And speaking of adapting, I noticed there are two editions, right? There's Basic and Pro. What's the difference there? Is Pro just like the super fancy version for, data analysis rock stars?
Not necessarily. Think of Basic as, your reliable everyday tool.
Right.
Gets the job done. Pro is more like, if Basic is a screwdriver, Pro is like a whole Swiss Army knife.
Oh, okay.
You still have all the core functions, but you get all these extra tools. Like custom evaluations and data validation.
Nice.
And you can even make these super fancy reports that, will impress even the toughest reviewers.
Okay, you've sold me on Pro, but before I go and start drooling over all the bells and whistles, let's, take a little peek behind the curtain. How is the software actually organized?
Well, one of the first things you'll notice is this backstage area, and you get there through the File tab.
Okay.
It's kind of like your control panel. You can see things like your license information, your usage history. You can even change the application settings.
Oh, wow.
You even control where all your data is stored.
Wait, so I don't have to go digging through a million folders trying to remember where I saved that one important file?
Nope, no more digging.
Game changer.
MyAssays Desktop really puts you in control of your data.
I like that.
And speaking of organization, let's talk about the layout editors.
Okay.
These are like the blueprints for your experiments.
Okay.
They tell MyAssays Desktop how your samples are arranged. Whether they're in microplates or even racks of tubes and vials.
Racks. So it's not just for microplate readers. I was kind of picturing this as, just for those big high-throughput setups.
No, it's pretty versatile.
Okay.
And here's a cool thing. The layouts, they're dynamic. So if you're only working with, say, a small experiment,
yeah,
the layout adjusts. No more messing with fixed tables and resizing everything.
Oh, that sounds nice. Very user-friendly.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, for me, the real test is the data analysis. That's where things tend to get a little messy,
Yeah.
How does MyAssays Desktop handle the heavy lifting, when you're crunching numbers and trying to make sense of these complex data sets?
This is where MyAssays Desktop really shines. It's designed to make even complicated data analysis intuitive.
Okay.
And a big part of that is how it handles data arrangement.
Okay.
You might have multiple plates, different analytes, maybe even different batches of an experiment.
Right.
MyAssays Desktop puts all that data together so you can see the bigger picture.
So you're not just looking at one plate at a time. You can actually see how everything connects.
Exactly.
That's very cool. Now, I can't resist asking, are there any hidden tricks, any power user secrets in this software? What about the folks who really want to go beyond the basic features?
Oh, yeah, there are definitely some gems hidden in there.
Okay, good.
One thing that makes MyAssays Desktop really flexible is that you can actually use parts of the layout in your calculations.
Wait, right?
Yeah, so it's not just about seeing your data. You can actually use the layout itself as part of your analysis.
Hold on, you're telling me I can, use the fact that sample A is in B2 as part of a formula.
Exactly.
How does that even work?
It's all about something called sample group references. Now, they work a little differently depending on whether you're using standard curves across multiple plates.
Right.
But the key is that the numbering is always local to that container.
Okay.
So it keeps everything clear and organized, even when your data is spread out over, several plates or racks.
Oh, that's very clever. So that means I could take data from, say, 3 plates and analyze it as if it was one giant experiment.
Yep, that's the idea.
Wow, no more getting lost in a sea of spreadsheets.
Exactly.
That's the power of good software.
It is.
But that's not all, is it? There's got to be more.
Oh, there's always more. For the real data ninjas out there, there's something called transform output variables.
Ooh, I like the sound of that. What are transform output variables? What kind of magic can they unlock?
Well, think of them like they give you access to like specific data points and calculations that aren't usually shown in the standard output.
Okay.
So like imagine you're working on a really complex ELISA, right? And you need to figure out a very specific ratio
Yeah.
based on like multiple measurements.
Okay.
TOVs, those transform output variables, they're like the raw ingredients, that let you build that custom analysis.
Okay, so it's like you can kind of peek under the hood and really fine-tune things.
Exactly.
That's cool, but it sounds pretty advanced.
Yeah.
Do I really need to worry about this if I'm, just a regular user?
Probably not. TOVs are more for the power users.
Right.
The people who really want to push the limit of what the software can do.
Okay, so it's there if you need it, but you don't have to use it.
Right. And even if you never touch them, the standard features are already super powerful.
All right, that makes sense. Now, all this talk about data analysis, it makes me wonder, where is all this data actually stored? How does MyAssays Desktop handle things like data storage and import? Is it like a Wild West free-for-all, or does it help keep things organized?
No, it's definitely organized. Remember that backstage area we talked about?
Yeah.
Well, there's this section called Where is my data?
Okay.
And it tells you exactly where those files are kept.
Oh, that's nice.
And it's all nicely organized under one main folder, so backing up your data is super easy.
As someone who has definitely lost data before, that sounds like a dream come true.
It is a lifesaver.
But getting the data into the software in the first place, that can be a pain sometimes,
Yeah.
What are the import options? Like, can it handle those messy Excel files we all love to hate?
Oh, yeah. It's actually really good at importing data.
Okay, good.
You can copy and paste from other places. You can import directly from Excel file, or even use like specialized formats from some instrument manufacturers.
So no matter how my data is formatted, there's a good chance MyAssays Desktop can handle it.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's impressive. But does that, ever backfire? Are there certain file types it just chokes on, or situations where the import process gets all wonky?
It's pretty robust. There might be some really, really specific file types it doesn't support directly. But even then, you could probably convert the data into a format it can use.
Right.
And if you're using the Pro version, you can actually create custom protocols for imported files.
Oh, wow.
So you have even more control over the whole process.
Okay, I'm noticing a theme more. Flexibility, customization.
Yeah.
It's like MyAssays Desktop is saying, hey, we trust your data, so here are the tools, do what you need to do.
That's the philosophy.
I like that. Now, to make the whole import process even easier, there's this thing called the import wizard, right?
Right.
What's that all about?
It makes it really simple to bring in not just your measurements, but also like sample IDs, clade IDs, even dilution factors.
So it's like having a little helper that organizes everything before you even start analyzing the data.
That's a good way to put it.
I like that. But let's be honest, the real fun starts when we get to see the results.
Yeah.
How is MyAssays Desktop when it comes to reporting? Is it just basic tables, or can it do, some of those fancy visuals that make the data really pop?
Oh, it can definitely get visual. You got your basic tables, but also histograms, XY plots, even more specialized stuff.
Really?
Yeah, it's like a toolbox for turning your data into a story.
Ooh, I love a good data story.
Yeah.
What are some of the reporting features that you think are really, standout, impressive?
Two that come to mind are curve overlay charts and evaluations tables.
Okay, let's start with curve overlay charts. What are those all about?
Basically, they let you compare multiple curves on the same chart.
Okay.
Really helpful for seeing trends and, how different conditions or samples compare to each other.
So you can see multiple experiments all talking to each other on one chart.
Exactly.
That's cool. Now, what about those evaluations tables? What makes them so special?
Well, they let you go beyond just the, basic results.
Okay.
You can show custom calculations or derived values or basically any information you can create using the software's, formulas and stuff.
So instead of just getting the answers the software thinks I want, I can actually tailor it to answer my specific questions.
Exactly.
That's what I'm talking about, a true deep dive. But let's not forget about the practical stuff. In the lab, reliability is everything, right?
Right.
How does MyAssays Desktop handle validation and quality control? We can't have these fancy reports if the data's no good.
Yeah, for sure. Luckily, MyAssays Desktop takes validation very seriously.
Okay, good.
It uses these things called validations. They're like Boolean conditions that check if your measurements and results are within the expected range.
Okay, so break that down for me. What kind of checks are we talking about? Give me a real-world example.
Okay, let's say you're running an assay where the coefficient of variation or percent CV of your replicates has to be below a certain value.
Yeah.
You can set up a validation that will flag any samples where the percent CV is too high.
So the software does all the checking for me.
It does.
Okay, that saves a lot of time. But isn't there a danger of like becoming too reliant on those automated checks? How do I make sure I'm still thinking critically about the data and not just blindly trusting the software's flags?
That's a great point. You always have to use your judgment. Those automated checks are tools to help you, not replacements for your own thinking.
Right.
You should always look closely at anything the software flags
Right.
and decide what to do based on your expertise.
Tools are great, but you have to know how to use them.
Exactly.
Now, what about like more general quality control measures? Does MyAssays Desktop have anything beyond those specific validations?
Yeah, definitely. You can run quality control checks whenever you want.
Okay.
Or you can actually build them directly into each report, so there's consistency across all your analysis.
Again, I'm really liking this emphasis on flexibility, letting the user decide how they want to do things.
It's all about giving you the control.
That's great. Now, there are a few other details I wanted to touch on, just, little things that can make a big difference in your day-to-day work. Now, for the folks who like to tinker, MyAssays Desktop offers command line arguments.
Yes, it does.
Now, that gets me excited because that opens up a whole world of possibilities for scripting and automation.
Absolutely.
But let's be real, command line stuff isn't for everyone.
Right.
Is this something only the, super techie people need to worry about?
Yeah, it's definitely for the more advanced users.
Okay.
The ones who want to really dive into customizing and automating things.
So it's there if you need it, but not essential.
Exactly.
And if you really want to get your hands dirty with customization, there's something called tweak files.
That's right.
Okay, what kind of tweaking are we talking about here? Is it just cosmetic stuff, or can you actually change how the software works?
With tweak files, you can modify almost any data analysis parameter.
Wow.
It's really for the tech-savvy user who wants complete control.
So we've gone from basic data analysis to, like, modifying the DNA of the software itself.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful.
That's amazing. But let's bring it back down to earth for a second. Okay, we've talked a lot about, power user features and all that.
Right.
But what about someone who's just starting out with MyAssays Desktop?
Yeah.
Is it overwhelming for beginners, or is there a gentle learning curve?
That's one of the great things about MyAssays Desktop.
Yeah.
It works for all levels of users.
Okay.
The interface is really intuitive.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
the user guide is super helpful.
Good.
Even if you're totally new to data analysis, you can pick it up pretty quickly.
That's great to hear. It's like, it's got training wheels for the beginners, but you can take them off and really fly once you're ready.
Exactly.
But with all these features, it's easy to get lost in the weeds,
Right.
What makes MyAssays Desktop really stand out? What's the big takeaway message for our listeners? What's going to make them say, I need this?
I think the biggest thing is its versatility.
Okay, yeah.
It's not just for one type of assay or one type of instrument.
Right.
It can handle a huge range of assay types, data formats, analysis needs.
So whatever you throw at it, it can handle it.
Pretty much. And it does all this while being really easy to use.
Okay.
And it's always focused on data integrity. So, your results are reliable.
That's important. Labs are constantly changing. New technologies pop up, research questions evolve. You need a tool that can keep up. But what about the people who made the software? What's their, philosophy? What problem are they trying to solve?
Well, they really want to empower researchers.
Okay.
They understand that data analysis can be a real bottleneck.
Yeah.
And they built a tool that makes that process smoother.
More efficient, more
Yep.
reliable.
And ultimately, more insightful.
Exactly.
It's like they're saying, focus on the science, let us take care of the data.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And that's a message that I think any researcher can appreciate. Anyone who's ever felt bogged down by spreadsheets and manual calculations.
Definitely. Now, before we wrap up, there are a couple other things I wanted to mention.
Okay.
Just, features that our listeners might find interesting, especially if they're looking to make their data analysis even more powerful.
Oh, okay. I like powerful. What do you have in mind?
Well, one thing is you can create custom reports that are really tailored to specific needs.
So if you need to present data to, different groups of people like colleagues or collaborators or even funding agencies.
Yeah, that's important. It's not enough to just analyze the data. You have to be able to communicate it effectively.
Right.
And a good report can make all the difference.
It can.
What other features are there that kind of fall into this category of, making data analysis work for you?
Well, you can also automate a lot of tasks like data import, analysis, even report generation.
Oh, automation. That's a beautiful word.
It is.
That can free up so much time.
It can. Researchers are busy people, so anything that saves time is a win.
Right, but isn't there a risk of losing control when you automate things? How do you know that the automated processes are still doing what they're supposed to do?
Well, MyAssays Desktop gives you a lot of control over the automation.
Okay.
You can define exactly what you want it to do, set thresholds, even create custom scripts.
Okay.
So you can really tailor it to your needs.
And of course, you can always go back and check the results, make sure everything looks right.
Exactly. You're always in control.
That's good. That's reassuring. It's like having, a co-pilot for your data analysis,
Right.
someone who can handle the routine stuff while you focus on the big picture.
That's a good analogy.
But let's be realistic, no software is perfect.
Right.
What are some of the, limitations or potential drawbacks of MyAssays Desktop? What should people be aware of before they, jump in headfirst?
Okay, good question. One thing to keep in mind is that MyAssays Desktop is mainly focused on data analysis and reporting.
Yeah.
It's not like a full-blown lab management system.
Okay.
So if you're looking for something to manage, inventory or sample tracking or things like that,
Right.
you might need to use a different tool or maybe integrate MyAssays Desktop with something else.
So it's a data analysis powerhouse, but it's not trying to do everything.
Right. It's important to know what it's good at and what it's not.
Right. Now, anything else that potential users should be aware of?
Another thing to remember is that while it's very versatile, it's still a specialized tool.
Right.
So if your research involves like really unique or unconventional data analysis techniques,
Okay.
you might need to look at other options or even develop your own custom solutions.
So it's not a magic bullet, but it's a powerful tool for a lot of common data analysis needs.
Exactly.
Okay, that sounds fair. But I want to bring it back to our listeners for a minute.
Okay.
Why should they care about MyAssays Desktop? What's the big takeaway message here?
The big takeaway is this. MyAssays Desktop can change the way you do data analysis.
Okay.
It's not just about crunching numbers. It's about finding insights, making your workflow smoother, and ultimately speeding up your research.
So it's about empowering researchers to do what they do best. Ask questions, design experiments, make discoveries.
Exactly.
And MyAssays Desktop is the perfect tool to help them on that journey.
I think so.
That's really cool. Now, and I guess this goes back to the support we were talking about earlier, but even if you do run into trouble, the MyAssays team, they're there to help, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're known for being super responsive.
Okay, good.
And really helpful.
That's great. I mean, knowing that there's someone you can reach out to, it can make a big difference.
It does, for sure.
So it's not just like throwing you the software and saying, good luck, figure it out.
No, not at all.
That's good. Now, before we wrap up completely, I want to make sure we haven't missed anything important from the user guide.
Right.
Anything else that really stood out to you?
One thing that I found really interesting was how much detail they give about the calculations and data transformations.
Okay.
We talked about TVs earlier.
Yeah.
But the user guide, it goes really deep into all the different math functions that are available.
Okay, math isn't exactly my forte, but I'm willing to be convinced.
Okay.
Can you give me an example of how, these functions would actually be used in a real experiment?
Sure. So let's say you're doing an ELISA,
Okay.
and you need to figure out the concentration of a sample based on your standard curve.
Okay.
Well, MyAssays Desktop, it has all these built-in functions for fitting different types of curves, like 4-parameter logistic or linear regression,
Right.
and it can just calculate those concentrations for you automatically.
Wow, that's nice. So no more like plotting points on graph paper and trying to draw the line by hand.
No more graph paper.
Thank goodness. But what if I need to do like a more specialized calculation? Something that's not one of the standard options. Can MyAssays Desktop handle that?
It can. There are functions for things like removing outliers, normalizing data,
Okay.
even creating custom calculations based on, whatever formulas you need.
So you can really get into the nitty-gritty if you need to.
Yeah, it's super flexible,
That's great. I love having options.
like a data playground.
But there's a fine line, right, between flexibility and complexity.
Uh-huh.
Does the software actually explain how to use all these advanced features?
That's actually one of the things I really liked about the user guide. It's not just, a boring technical manual.
Okay.
It gives a really clear explanations and examples for each function.
Oh, that's good.
You don't have to be a math expert to understand it.
Nice.
There are even sections that focus on specific assay types
Oh, wow.
and experimental considerations with tips on optimizing things and troubleshooting.
So it's not just about how to use the software. It's about understanding the science behind it all.
Right. It's like having a mentor built right in.
That's awesome. It really shows that the developers, they care about helping researchers.
They do.
They understand that data analysis is about more than just numbers.
Right.
It's about answering questions, and making discoveries.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm sold. MyAssays Desktop, it's not just software. It's a whole approach to data analysis.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's about giving researchers the power to get the most out of their data,
Right.
regardless of their, technical skills.
I agree.
All right, well, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into MyAssays Desktop. We've covered a lot today, from the basics to some of the more advanced stuff.
We have.
And I think we've given our listeners a pretty good overview of what makes this software so valuable.
Definitely. We've seen how it helps with organizing data, doing those complex analogies, making insightful reports,
Uh-huh.
and most importantly, making sure your results are accurate and reliable.
We talked about its flexibility, all the customization options,
Right.
and that focus on giving the user control.
It's really all about empowering the researcher.
It is. It's more than just a tool. It's like a partner in the whole scientific process.
I like that.
So as we finish up, I want to encourage everyone listening, think about how MyAssays Desktop could change your research.
Yeah, think about the questions you could answer, the insights you could uncover.
Now that you've seen what it can do, don't be afraid to dive in, explore your data.
Have fun with it.
With the power of MyAssays Desktop, the possibilities are endless.
Absolutely.
Happy analyzing, everyone.